Well, let's now turn to advisory and take a look at remuneration strategies that underpin profitable business performance. We're joined by Trudy Macdonald, founder and managing director of TalentCode HR. Trudy, good to see you.
Thank you, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
Now, we know a big cost of any business is the labour force,
Yes.
and particularly if you look at executive salaries as well. Now, more recently, there's been a lot of disquiet, particularly from shareholders, about remuneration. What do you need to be wary of?
Yeah, well, I think that it's a really interesting time in the market because from an employee perspective, there's a lot of pressure to be increasing their remuneration, and they're putting that pressure back on their employers. That's been driven by inflation, by cost of living, but more importantly, and what I think is compounding this, is a lot of organisations are rightsizing or restructuring, and that means teams aren't necessarily fully resourced. Individuals perceive that they're working hard, and subsequently they're putting a lot of pressure to be increasing their remuneration.
So how are the businesses responding to that pressure then?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think most organisations are really struggling to maintain their prior levels of profitability. And I work across all industries, and what I'm hearing consistently is that productivity and performance isn't what it used to be. You've got this impact of people expecting higher remuneration in that environment, and many leaders are actually recognising that it's not sustainable. So a law firm I was working with recently, they came to me with exactly that issue. They said, look, we've recognised that our practices of providing people with a CPI increase as a blanket increase every year is actually no longer sustainable, even though from an employee perspective that might be considered a minimum expectation. So there's a real rethink going on in the market around how to differentiate performance and how to tie that to remuneration.
Yeah, you mentioned productivity or lack of it. That's clearly a frustration for, well, the RBA's mentioned that, the
Yes.
federal government, and clearly individual companies as well. So
Yeah.
if that's an issue then, is that, and at the same time employees asking for wage increases, does
Yes.
that potentially lead to job losses?
It is, and that's where a lot of organisations are restructuring and resizing. There's a few key things organisations can do to move through this though, and this is what leading organisations are doing. So the first is being really clear around having a remuneration strategy in place. What a lot of businesses have realised they've stopped doing is holding people accountable. And that actually goes back to the foundation of making sure everybody understand what's expected of them in the role, that there's clear measures of success, and the accountability practices enable them to differentiate performance. Because I think in that environment, you can make sure you can reward your high performers, but also you're not overpaying suboptimal performance. And this is the tricky position many leaders and businesses have got themselves into.
And you talk about the importance of salary benchmarking. What does that
Yes.
amount to?
Yeah, so what that means is organisations need to know exactly what their position is in terms of how they're going to pay their people, not only relative to the market, but you're looking at internal parity as well. So there's a really important psychological concept with remuneration, and that is perceived fairness. If individuals don't perceive that they're paid fairly relative to the market, relative to their peers, remuneration becomes all-consuming, and that will actually detract from profitability.
Yes, so one size fits all doesn't work necessarily. So what a business needs to be flexible, reward those with high productivity that are bringing business to the business.
Yes, absolutely. So what a lot of businesses are now starting to do for the first time is really focusing on the role of variable remuneration. So I'm talking about bonuses, I'm talking about incentive schemes. And if you look at that in the context of the whole remuneration ecosystem, it means that you can keep your fixed remuneration fair but low and really reward the upside in a variable way. And that's really the secret to organisations being able to navigate the ups and downs economically, because when times are good and individuals are performing, they can be rewarded, but they're not stuck with a high base salary that may have been rewarded a few years ago when times were good.
So overall, what's your advice to those business leaders then?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and remuneration doesn't sit in isolation, and I think that's the important concept. There's an ecosystem within organisations around people, performance, culture. So my first takeaway for leaders is to recognise that remuneration is not the silver bullet if you're looking to increase productivity and performance. However, you need to get it right, because if you don't get it right and it's not perceived to be fair, then that means you're rewarding high performers, that you're differentiating reward, remuneration will detract from productivity and performance.
And is it all about pay, or can there be a mix, a remuneration package as such, where you offer other incentives?
Absolutely, and there's a lot of research to suggest that if you get money right, you take it off the table, and it's actually culture and a sense of future and development and growth. They're the things that are going to really drive productivity. And for many leaders, they struggle with how to engage their teams, so there's an intrinsic drive to want to be productive and performing. Get the money right, and then you can focus on those other things, and that's where you'll make the difference.